realfaith.org.au.
There was a bus and it was just coming along and it was full of people. There were people hanging off the bus and I thought, there is no way I'm going to get on that bus. And I thought, how on earth am I going to get home? And then another bus came quietly along and it was going to a little village called Yarraki, which is a bit further on, and they said that they had space on that bus. So I climbed on that bus and we were driving down the valleys and there was the burnt out wreck of the bus that I missed.
Welcome to Real Faith, conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through, helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
When a young Dave Yetman left his home in New Zealand in 1993 and flew to the other side of the world to do ministry work in Ecuador, he had no idea that it would change his life forever. It was there that he met someone he would never forget, his future wife, Anni Lou. Also while he was there, a few years later, he met someone he wishes he could forget. Yes, that's when he met me, while I was also a missionary in Ecuador at the same time with my wife, Jean. But despite all this, I've decided to interview him today and find out his story and what eventually brought him to Australia. Dave Yetman, also known as the Yeti, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Eric.
So glad to have you with us. So happy that there was somebody you met that you are so happy that you'll never forget, but also that other guy you wish you could forget.
Well, and I'm looking at him right now.
You're looking at me right now. But anyway, all that to say that you and I go way back.
We do.
And you didn't meet Anni Lou right away.
No.
It was your fifth trip?
Yeah, so I went there to work short-term on the radio transmitters there in 93, twice in 95, and then eventually, after Bible school, I went back in 98, and that's when I met her.
And that was the International Shortwave Ministry, known at the time as HCJB World Radio, which is now known as Reach Beyond, who, as a side note, were sitting in their studios here in Melbourne.
That's right.
Having this conversation.
Yes.
And as another side note to the side note, you and I both worked here at one point.
That's right.
We're getting ahead of ourselves. But let's go back to you and I met in orientation, if I remember, in Ecuador.
Yes.
So you were coming on staff full time.
Yes, that's right.
Then, and so Jean and I were coming on, and so we were in the orientation together. And I'm getting to know this Kiwi guy. I learned what kiwi meant. Right. Not just a fruit.
Oh, well.
So you were there, but at that time you were married to Anni Lou.
That's right. Yeah. So we started as what they called working visitors back then. It was a temporary situation, and we were, because we hadn't done the orientation, that's why we joined you guys when you came along to try and do that and get ourselves up to the level that we were supposed to be, sort of thing.
Right. And then a few years later, you and I, within about 6 months of each other, moved from Ecuador to Australia.
That's right.
And that's when you and I went in on paying for a container to put all our stuff in.
Yeah, all your junk and my good things.
Now what happened was I was leaving before you, so I gave you all of our stuff in faith that you would put it in the container. And you did such a fantastic job that when the container arrived here in Australia in, what is it, customs or whatever it is, the customs guy said a mouse could not even crawl in that container because it was packed so tightly.
I tried. I tried to get every inch I could out of that $3,000 container so we could get as much stuff as we could here.
Well, you succeeded. I was wise in partnering with an engineer who had about 6 months to analyze all our stuff and see how it would fit in there.
And I didn't crush too many things, I don't think.
Not too many things. So it all got over here, and that's kind of how we all got here to Australia. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's find out your story. Let's go all the way back to where it all started in Christchurch in New Zealand.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family of 6 children, and I must say, I mean, there was some storms around the time I was born, and my sister used to say that Dave is so anxious, or I was so anxious. Dave gets so scared when he leaves the house, he has to hold onto his head and hope that it doesn't blow off. So anxiety was part of my growing up, and the worry that something new might come along, and probably the reason why I wasn't interested in anything new was because I was pretty scared.
Now, just look at the irony. You're an anxious child, don't want anything new, and you end up, ultimately, with the Lord's help, having this big, big adventure, doing something very new. Nobody else in your family had done anything like that. Going to the other side of the world?
Yeah, and I think that's where other people come in. There were so many people along the track who encouraged me, people who God brought into my life and said, you can do this, or God can do this through you. And that's what really brought me along. I was sitting in a conference telling people about the Perspectives course and how to get information about the various countries they were interested in going to. This was a missions youth conference. And I'd sat next to a guy who was in the booth next to me talking about HCJB, and he said, you're an engineer, you could come and help us. And I thought, oh, perhaps I could. And that was the start, a step along the way.
Okay, well, let's go back a little bit and find out, how did you become a Christian in the first place?
Yeah, so I think I remember my older brother and sister coming home from church, and they said they'd become a Christian, and they seemed to have some joy in their life, and I thought, well, if they've got some joy in their life, I want to have some too. And I was about 4, so I said, Mummy and Daddy, how do I do this? So we kneeled down on the settee or on the couch and led in a simple prayer, and I think that's the time when I started along that journey.
And through your teenage years and all that, did you stay close to the Lord?
Yeah, so it was exciting growing up as a teenager. Our church got involved in a beach mission, and every year we as teenagers used to go there and be involved in seeing God lead children to faith in Him. And that was just a time where we learnt to rely on God and see Him touch and change people's lives. And
then eventually you mentioned that you became an engineer.
Yeah, so later on in life, my dad had been an engineer. I decided to be an engineer, and so that happened. And then I really felt missions was part of what God wanted me to do. I didn't know what. I thought perhaps He wanted. But
even though you were anxious, did you still have this anxiousness?
I did, but I probably wasn't thinking about it too much.
Well, that's good. Yeah. The Lord had been working on you,
and so it was more the thought, perhaps I can do something. Perhaps I can do something in the back and behind, Perhaps I can raise funds. That doesn't mean I don't have to go anywhere.
Oh, okay. Just be a supporter of missions.
Exactly. And then this opportunity came along. I thought, well, tell me how I can do this. And so that was a step.
So let's learn a little bit more about the opportunity. HCJB World Radio at that time, back in the 90s, was international shortwave radio from Quito, Ecuador, in South America.
Yeah.
So that's the hub where it was all happening.
Yes.
And they needed engineers, and it fit for what your background was?
Yeah, exactly. So I was working for Telecom New Zealand as an engineer, and I felt, well, this is something I reckon I could do. And they said, why don't you come over and help us for a few months? So that's what I did.
So is that how it started, just short-term trips?
Yes, so 3 months at a time, going over, helping the team there, the engineers, and getting to know enough Spanish to try and not get myself into trouble, and that sort of thing.
Yes, the Spanish, I don't even want to talk about that. You've succeeded in that area far better than I ever did. But let's find out about the romantic side of all this. Let's go to the 5th trip. That's the key one, right? So
let's just say 5 trips in, I was really enjoying the culture. And I had lots of fun, and I had friends at Campus Crusade, and we used to hang out, and they helped me with my Spanish. That was good. So my 5th trip, I went along. I just finished Bible school. It was in for the next 2 years in Ecuador, and I went along to Campus Crusade, and all my mates were there, and that was fun. And I think I walked down, like anyone walk into a meeting, I walked in with my Super Soaker water pistol.
No, wait a second. A Super Soaker water pistol? Why in the world would you be carrying that?
Carnival, brother. Carnival.
Ah, Carnival. Well, we have to explain what that means.
Okay, so it's a time when people get soaked with water.
This is an Ecuadorian cultural thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Once a year on a certain day, which I can't remember.
February, yeah.
February. Somehow it's part of the carnival season, and anybody, anywhere could just end up getting wet. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even matter if you know them.
Right. Yeah.
They would just get anybody soaked with water.
Exactly. Yeah. It
was really weird.
I mean, you can be walking along the street and some people come along in a ute or a pickup and they just dump a load of water on top of you.
Yeah, complete strangers. Yeah, it was really different.
Exactly. So anyway, so I went in there and I looked at my mates. Oh, good, my mates are here. And then there was this beautiful young person who was there as well, and I thought, wow, where did she come from? and so that was the start of something.
But she wasn't interested.
No, she apparently looked across the room when I was thinking, wow. And she,
She
was
wasn't
thinking
thinking the same thing.
What is this white-looking American guy staring at me for? And so she left the room and went to talk to her friends. She said, this American looks really strange. How do I get rid of him? And they said, well, actually, he's not American. He's actually a Kiwi, a New Zealander. So she'd actually known a family from New Zealand growing up. Peter, Andrew and Philip were the boys, and she and her brother played with them. And she thought, wow, Kiwi. And she said, I might give this guy a bit of time. So she gave me, she's given me 25 years.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this story. She was turned off if she thought you were an American.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are some negative feelings about Americans in Latin America. So.
We won't go there, but yes, I've heard that before. So she had a positive feeling toward you once she found out you were Kiwi.
Yes.
And specifically because of the family that she knew.
Exactly.
But there's more to the story with that family.
Yeah, so they were missionaries with HCJB, and later on, when we went back to New Zealand, we were able to meet up with them and the three boys. So that was really quite fun to catch up.
And what's the connection to your father?
Oh, so the funny thing, if you go farther enough back,
yes.
My father came out on a boat from England in 1948, and the father of that family was a baby coming out on the same boat with his parents. So
Same
boat from England in 1948.
And if it wasn't for that family,
Yeah.
your wife wouldn't have married you.
Well, I'd be worried, yeah. I don't know what trick I could have played.
Well, today we're going down memory lane with my good friend Dave Yetman, who's sharing his life journey with us. We just heard how Dave met his wife Anni Lou in Ecuador, South America. Next, we'll hear how Dave and Anni Lou eventually relocate to Australia and about some of the challenges they've faced over the years. All that and more is coming up when we return right here on Real Faith.
The word for today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scatabo, and today I'm chatting with my good friend Dave Yetman, who's originally from New Zealand. Before the break, we heard how Dave met his future wife, Anni Lou, in Ecuador, South America. Now we're going to hear what happened next in his life.
Yeah, so we ended up getting married. I mean, I was still learning Spanish at the time.
In Ecuador?
In Ecuador, yeah.
Okay.
So, and I said to her one time in my broken Spanish, I said, I'd really like to get married next year. And she said, well, that's fine. You can get married next year. You know what? I'm going to get married this year. I'll even come to your wedding next year if you want. I said, okay, this year.
That sounds like Anni Lou.
Yeah.
A question that just came to my mind. What language did you speak with each other?
So we mainly spoke Spanish.
Okay.
And
you were doing okay?
Yeah. So I was, by the time we got married, I'd arrived there in February. I'd been doing language school for 6 months, but 7 months by the time we got married, yeah.
So she's helped you?
Yeah. So I've had an inbuilt Spanish tutor.
Yeah, that's my excuse.
25 years.
Yeah, my wife is from St. Lucia in the Caribbean, speaks English.
Yeah.
I didn't have a personal tutor like you.
Yeah.
That's my excuse.
Okay.
That's why I was so terrible at it. But anyhow, so your relationship grew.
Yeah.
And then you stayed there doing ministry in Ecuador?
Yeah, so we stayed there for a couple of years, and then we went back and did home mission assignment there in New Zealand, and came back we were there from 1998 through to 2004.
And then you were married for a few years, and you wanted to have children?
Yeah, so we were moving along. We thought, well, it's time to have kids, and not a lot seemed to be happening in that department, so we got some medical support, and we couldn't find any major issues, but nothing was happening. So we decided, well, we believe God wants us to have a family, so we decided to adopt. So we went through the Ministry of Social Welfare in Ecuador, and we went to try and adopt kids. And we got through all the system, and we got through all the hoops, and it was just about time when we were going to be selected as parents. And about that time, there was some people from Australia, of all place. They were saying, we need to start a new HCJB in Kununurra, Northwest Australia, broadcast to Asia.
Right,
and
shortwave radio.
That really excited us about that. So, and we felt God was calling us to. So we went back to the Department of Social Welfare in Ecuador and said, can we do this and leave the country? They said, sorry, if you leave the country in the first 3 years, you can't keep the kids. So that was really a bit of a blow.
Yeah, because you were so close.
Yeah, but the good thing, Anni Lou really felt God was calling us to, and that was important for me. She felt God would somehow provide us with family. So we decided to come to Australia anyway.
And that's when you and I went in on a container together.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one.
With all of our stuff.
Yeah.
And then what happened when you were unpacking that container?
Yeah, so we had heaps of stuff in that container. It was
Yes, I remember.
Lots of fun unpacking that container. And we were unpacking the container, and Anni Lou just started to get really, really tired. And I thought, well, it's hard work, so that's just life. And then a few weeks later, we did a test, and we were pregnant with my first son, Adriel, so that was great.
Yeah, and that was back in 2000 and what?
2004. He was born in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, of course, side note, my wife Jean babysat.
She did.
Adriel back when he was
Jean.
Auntie Jean babysat Adriel when you had to fly up to Sydney for a
Ecuadorian passport. Yeah.
Okay, and then again she babysat when
when baby Michaela was born. Yeah,
right. So
in 2007.
That's right. So we obviously knew your family back then.
Yep.
And then we should just kind of side note. Right now, the reason why you're in Melbourne is because Adriel, fast forward, is 18 years old and going to university.
Yeah, so we're
and
just
you're here
him
to
up at uni here.
Yeah, set him up at Monash.
Yeah.
So wow, it just seemed like yesterday Gene was babysitting him, and then now he's going to school for aero. What do I have?
Aerospace engineering is, I think, is what
aerospace
they call it at
engineering.
Monash. Yeah.
So following in your footsteps in
sort
engineering.
of a little bit of engineering here in the background. Yeah. Grandfather was mechanical engineer.
Is that right?
Father, electrical and electronic engineer, and he wants to be an engineer too. So.
Wow. So it's following in the family. So you were then, let's go back to, you're in Melbourne.
Yeah.
At the shortwave ministry.
Yeah.
That's where, and you and I were both here. We both had moved over at that time. So you worked in radio frequencies or something like that?
Yeah, so I was the frequency manager. I was also involved in some of the design work for the technical design of the site in Kununurra, and I was also involved in IT because I quite enjoyed IT, and so I rewired the whole studios.
The studios that we're in right now?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. And then eventually you moved down to Tasmania and were involved in ministry there?
Yeah, so after HCJB, I really felt I loved the IT side of things and I wanted to do some studies. So I went to study IT down in Tasmania and my wife went and studied at the Worldview Centre for Intercultural Studies, which is part of WEC International.
What is WEC?
WEC, Worldwide Evangelization for Christ, I think is what it is. CT Stud. Look up CT Stud, the founder.
So a worldwide ministry.
Yes, exactly.
Missions organization.
Yeah, and Worldview, a training institution of that.
And you've been down there for
15 years. Yeah.
15 years.
So I started in IT, helping Worldview, and then that expanded to the whole of WEC Australia. Yeah.
But then unfortunately that came to an end?
Yeah, so technology changes, and for WEC they changed to Microsoft
Thank
Cloud.
goodness radio interviews don't change.
and really there was still work, but there wasn't a lot of work for me, and the technical level of it was quite simple.
Yeah.
And I felt, no, it's time to move. So at that stage, I had to say, well, what do I do next? And that's a recent story,
Tell us about that. You were struggling. I mean, suddenly you're in your 50s.
Yeah, so I was looking for a job. I was technically unemployed. I was still mowing lawns down at Worldview because I wanted to keep doing something. And then I was looking for a job. And I looked on, of all places, Facebook.
Oh.
I saw a job on Facebook and I thought, oh, Facebook. But I know those people who are advertising this job. I'll go and find out. So it was at the Door of Hope Christian Church, and they had a storage facility. It's a church that took over a 100-year-old woolen mill and used it for their church and various businesses. And so I went to see the boss there, and she said, "Yeah, we'd really love you to apply for the job." So I applied for the job, and I got it.
Yeah.
And it's just been really interesting. It's been a job that's been part-time. I didn't want to work full-time anymore. And yeah, lots of things. I even drive a forklift these days.
Wow.
Eric.
Wow.
So
that sounds like fun. I don't know if they would allow me to get near it.
But the lady said later, she said, she was the manager there, she said, "I was just praying for the right person to walk in and apply for the job." And I mentioned that to the pastor in charge of counselling at the church. And then 1 hour later, you walked in and asked about the job.
Wow.
And just God sent you.
Wow. That's fantastic.
So that's great.
So I have to ask this. Why in the world does a church have storage units?
So
it's not the typical ministry that a church has.
So God provided this woolen mill, 100-year-old woolen mill.
Yeah.
Okay, it had a good area for auditorium for the church, for Sunday school, all those sort of things. It had spaces they could rent out. There was actually someone already in there who had actually started a storage business.
Oh, okay.
And as part of the sale to the church, they had the opportunity to take that over. And so obviously having 700 storage units there, it was an opportunity to make quite a lot of money. And so
to support the church?
To support the church ministry. So
like a tent-making ministry.
It's sort of something like that, yeah. So we have 700 storage units, and we're about to build a whole lot more because they're all full, and we need to have some units we can actually sell.
And you get to have fun sweeping them out. So the Lord provided for you.
Yeah.
And then recently you went back to Ecuador to visit family.
That's right.
And if people are paying attention in the news, unfortunately, there's been some violence and some things happening that doesn't make a trip to Ecuador so appealing.
Yes, it was quite exciting.
What was happening in general?
Okay, so there was general violence happening there, and they
basically between the drug lords,
and the presidency.
Yeah.
So therefore they had to start locking things down and trying to stop the violence occurring, stop the bombings occurring, and all that sort of thing.
So it's not sounding too appealing to go there.
Yeah.
But your wife was already there visiting family.
With the children, yes.
With the children, and you were back.
Yes. So they went
in
for Christmas.
Tasmania.
I couldn't go for Christmas because I had some work to do.
Yeah. So you're back in Tasmania with your family on the other side of the world, and then you get a phone call from her.
Yeah, so I had a phone call from her saying, we're a bit concerned, there's violence in the streets, there's bombs, and her brother, who's the medical director of a large hospital, said, there's a gun battle happening just outside the windows of the hospital. You need to get the kids, get back into the apartment and stay there till I tell you that it's safe to come out again.
Wow. So how are you feeling when you're hearing this?
A little bit anxious, you know?
Yeah. Now that anybody would be anxious about.
Yeah. So I said to some friends there, I said, I'm quite anxious, but I really feel that this is the time for us to go back. This is a family holiday. Adriel's going off to uni next year. We need to continue doing this. So I felt also, if you look at the history of my life, God has always protected me. So if we go back to when in one of my early trips, we go back to 1998 when I was dating Anni Lou, and we had a chaperone with us from Campus Crusade, which was quite common back those 25 years ago. And he told me we were in a restaurant, we were having a good time, and he said, "You really need to go and catch a bus back down the valley where you live, because otherwise it's going to be the last bus, and you can't walk home 40 kilometres at night." So tried to catch the bus, and there was a bus, and it was just coming along, and it was full of people. There were people hanging off the bus, and I thought, there is no way I'm going to get on that bus. And I thought, how on earth am I going to get home?
Yeah.
And eventually they pulled a few people more onto the bus, and the bus left. And
so you missed it.
Silence. Yeah, I missed the bus.
Yeah.
And I was really thinking, what do I do now? How do I get home? I was trying to talk to the chaperone and go, I don't know. Where can I stay in Quito? What am I going to do? And then, we were sort of giving up about 5 minutes later, and then another bus came quietly along, and it was going to a little village called Yaraki, which is a bit further on, and they said that they had space on that bus. So I climbed on that bus, and they said they could drop me off in my village. So that all worked out. But the interesting thing was, this is where you see God's faithfulness, I missed the bus that was going to the village I needed to get to.
Mhm.
And
The
we were
first bus.
driving down the valleys into where the township is, and there was the burnt out wreck of the bus
Oh, wow.
that I missed.
What happened?
I have no idea. I imagine it overheated. I mean, you're dealing with
So
buses
it
going
just
to,
caught on fire?
yeah, I'm guessing. So I said, God knows what our future is. God knows when our future is
Yeah,
going to happen.
yeah.
And God protected me then. And I know that God will and can protect us in each moment. And
Amen.
He knows what our future is.
So all that to say that even though your family was on the other side of the world,
Yes.
in a violence-filled part of the world, you had peace.
I did. I sensed that God was going to do whatever God was going to do, and I knew that we could trust in Him.
And then you joined them.
Yes, we had a great time. There were so many little things that God did when we were there, just sort of like, yeah, God knows. God can be trusted. We can have peace and know that He will be faithful to us.
Amen. And because you have family contacts there, in practical reality, they know where to go and where to avoid.
Exactly.
Although, I mean there's no guarantees
No.
anywhere.
No, exactly.
Like a bus could catch on fire.
Exactly.
But you tried to be as wise as you could.
Exactly.
While there, and it
Yeah.
all worked out.
Yeah.
So you had a nice family holiday,
Great. It was wonderful, yeah.
and then you had the wonderful privilege of coming over and staying at our place
Yeah. Yeah.
to get your son settled in uni.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we hope you come up to visit more often because
Thank you.
we're having a good time hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
Wish you had less stress as you're trying to find accommodation for your son. But as we heard throughout your whole story,
Yeah.
starts off, as you mentioned, an anxious child.
Yeah.
And now you're doing all kinds of things which would cause me to be very anxious.
Right. Yeah.
But the Lord's bringing you through it.
I mean, Auntie Jean prayed with us today, and it was just sort of special to have that prayer and that support. And yeah, I'm challenged with the traffic here in Melbourne.
That's causing you more anxiety than being in Ecuador.
Exactly. But God knows, and
That's right.
God can give us peace so that we can manage those situations.
Amen.
Yeah.
David Yetman, the Yeti, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Eric. It's been great to catch up again.
Well, it was so good to go down memory lane and get caught up with my good friend Dave Yetman from New Zealand. Hope you enjoyed his international story of faith, romance, and adventure. And until next time, I'm Eric Scadabo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.